Hello, everybody. So we are continuing our Kabbalah class, learning Ashlag Kaballah, and we are reading from this book. We are like a third of the way through this book called The Inner Work, which is basically excerpts from one of the Hagdamot, two or three actually, of the Hagdamot of the Bal Ha Sulam, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, who is the master Kabbalist of this generation. There are, of course, others. He wrote the Perush, the explanation, the commentary on the Zohar, and he decoded the Zohar for a modern audience. And since we're here coming to you from Sfat, and we are keenly aware that we have passed another milestone in the evolution of human consciousness, and that now many great Torah scholars and Kabbalists explain that in this generation we have the kalim, we have the vessels, in order that we are able to understand what is written in the Zohar HaKodesh and the other Kabbalistic books, and that's what we're doing here, is we're learning Kabbalah. Okay, so before I start reading the excerpts, I want to try something. I want to call out, a couple of classes ago, I called out to Jordan Peterson, one of the most brilliant thinkers of our generation, and somebody who is doing a lot of work online to try to push back the tide of multiculturalism and social collapse, and he's been doing some amazing work. Today I would like to address three other thinkers who are reaching tremendous audiences. Eric Weinstein, he is a mathematician and I believe also a physicist, and he is one of the most brilliant minds that we have today. And his Professor Brett Weinstein, who happens to be his brother, who's also doing amazing work online, and Lex Friedman, who is, I believe he went to MIT, and he is a programmer, a brilliant programmer at MIT, I believe, and all three of them have really showed the courage that's needed in this to fight back against all of this cancel culture and things like that, and speak truth to power. And all three of them regularly on their podcasts speak about how do we save the world. And so I would like to offer, and I know that I'm speaking to with as much humility as possible, speaking to some of the brightest minds that we have alive today in the secular world. And so I would like to try to call out from Sfat, which is the holy city in Israel, in northern Israel, where Kabbalah was studied, and really the Ari HaKodesh and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried here, and so this is the home of Kabbalah. So Eric Weinstein, I think you're probably a doctor and a professor and a whole bunch of other things, but I will address you the way you're addressed on your podcast, Eric Weinstein. I just want to say that I know that you have been looking, and I follow you closely, looking for the formula for everything. So I know you went to Tel Aviv University, so I assume that you are somewhat familiar with Israel. So I just want to hold up this book here. This is the Zohar HaKodesh. And so what I want to say to you is that, all three, please, is that if you have not, I know that, if we mention any book, any science book, any mathematics book, any book from secular university, all three of you will immediately be able to respond and understand and know what we're talking about. But here's the Zohar HaKodesh. And so my message to you is that that there are around, probably, I'm guessing now, 5,000 Jews in the world, serious Torah scholars, who know this book. This is obviously a volume of many, many books, the Zohar, and there are people who know these books backwards and forwards. And so in an attempt to try to sound convincing, I just want to mention that if you guys don't know this book, and I'm sure, I know you're familiar with the book, but if you don't know this book forwards to back, and also other Kabbalistic books that are filled with equations and the science of spirituality. So if those books if you have not mastered those books, and it's from the conversations that I've heard you speak online, I can see that a lot of the things that are being said are not in line with what is being said in the Zohar. And so if we're looking for a way to save the world, and we're looking for a way to unify, that's the word I was looking for, a unifying theory of everything, if we're looking for that, the formulas exist already, and they are in the Zohar, and specifically in the Hakdamot of the Bal Ha Sulam, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, and his first equation is Ein Od Mavado, there is nothing else but God, and Hashem is a tov umetim, that God is a good who does good. And so although that might sound very superficial on some level, the Ari HaKodesh tells us that that is the fundamental, the first principle of knowledge that we have access to in this world. And so there is IQ, there is EQ, emotional quotient, and there is also an SQ, which is a spiritual quotient. And so I invite you that in your search for a way to unify the planet and to bring humanity forward, that you look to the Zohar. If you are interested and you have and you want to contact us, by all means, we can put you in contact with the greatest Kabbalistic teachers of our generation here in Israel, and they can and they are well up to the challenge of engaging you in study of the Zohar. Okay, that was my message. A clarion call out to some of the most brilliant minds that we have now in society, working towards trying to figure out how to make the world a better place. I'll just say this, that there is nothing that is not corrupted, because we have people doing things. And so we have AI, and we have all of these ways of trying to fix the world, either by the social sciences of trying to find a better political system, or through technology. And the Bal Ha Sulam and the Kabbalists explain that that will never work, because the problem is within us, is that we have evil inside of ourselves, and that's how the way that we're created, and that the solution to that is to transcend our egos, and there is a methodology called Kaballah for doing that. Thank you so much. Okay, moving into the book. Okay, so I'm going to pick up where we left off last class. Reality is one, and God is enclosed in all of it. Reality is one, and God is enclosed in all of it. Okay, I think that is self-explanatory, and we can revisit this as we continue learning, but I'm going to move on to the next excerpt. L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody.
Hi.
When we realize that our impure... you know what? We did this one already. I'm going to move on. Receiving limits us. When we are in a state of giving, we are in a state of limitlessness. Receiving limits us. When we are in a state of giving, we are in a state of limitlessness. Okay, so we are concerned in this world that we have limited resources, but this is, the Kabbalah comes and tells us that this is, in fact, not the case, that in spirituality, when we enter into spirituality, into a state of altruism, that there is more than enough human resources, natural resources, for our world to exist in a balanced way where everybody shares in all of the bounty that we are already accessing in humanity. The problem is that the people who are involved in making all of these things, all of us, that's all of us, all of humanity, we are in our egos and we are selfish, and that is the reason why people have so much what's the word, lacking in life. And so take that for what you will. When receiving limits us, when we are in a state of giving, we are in a state of limitlessness. So there's an inverse relationship to spirituality and physicality. And so although it's possible, I think, to enter into a corrupted spiritual consciousness, we're talking about the holy consciousness that is in the spiritual world. And when we enter into that space, we will find out that there is a sharing, balance, and love that will transcend all of our differences in humanity. Okay, moving on. When we are in a state of giving and believing, there is no limitation, as no being or situation in the world can cause us to feel limited when we want to give. Therefore, the consciousness of giving is called freedom. Okay, I'm going to read it one more time. When we are in a state of giving and believing there is no limitation, as no being or situation in the world can cause us to feel limited when we want to give. Therefore, the consciousness of giving is called freedom. Okay? So we are in the narrative in the Bible is that the Israelites went down to Egypt. Egypt is the ego is a restrictive place in physicality, and that when we exit Egypt, we will find ourselves in a place where we are free, and free means giving. And so when everybody is giving to everybody else, we will find out that there is really no lack of physicality. There's really no place where we are going to be outside of having all of our needs met and having the joy that comes from being in balance with everybody else. The fuel for the spiritual work of emunah, which means faith, transcending understanding, he translates it as transcending understanding, is the light of the Torah, okay? The fuel for the spiritual work of emunah, transcending understanding, is the light of the Torah. So we explained this. Why is faith above reason such an important part that we cannot abandon in our spiritual work? And that is because when you want to connect the finite, which is the created beings, to the infinite, we are in a never-ending cycle of rising and of being higher than we were before. This is a never-ending process. If you look at the fractal patterns, they're just these never-ending worlds that just continue and continue and continue. And so, because of that reason, we need to have faith above reason, which means we have to have the faith that above us there is yet another level of unity, another level of love, another unit of devekut with Hashem, which means bonding with the creator of the universe. And so what I want to just say here is that a lot of work needs to be done to understand what we in the Torah world are talking about when we say God. And so we have many names of God, and the reason why we have so many names of God is because we live in a dualistic construct so that we can understand and have a relationship with God. So we may call God a judge, we call God a father, and a whole slew of spiritual names that correspond to different states of consciousness. And so we shouldn't be confused by that. What we should understand is that a lot of what is referred to in academia as God is a very, with all due respect, is a very truncated and immature understanding of what God is, and therefore it would be silly to believe in a God like that. But when we talk about God, we are talking about both the transcendent God, the God who exists outside of reality, above what was created, and then the God who we experience through all these different relationships inside of our what we call nature. Okay? Everybody following?
Yeah.
Okay. The essence of every person is exactly the same. The difference between people are only in the branches that come out of the essence. The essence of every person is exactly the same. The difference between people are only in the branches that come out of the essence. Okay, so this is a Kabbalistic term, roots and branches. We talk about roots and branches, and we have everything. If you look at the tree of life, everything is emanating from one source. Everything that we perceive as bitter and everything that we perceive as sweet is emanating from the same source with a single objective: to give over goodness and pleasure to the created beings. And so we're going to do a lot of talking and a lot of learning about why it is that we experience suffering in the world, and we've gone through it in other classes, and we'll continue the conversation. But here what we're saying is that it is very hard for us to have a relationship with God, because God is in the aspect of altruism, of giving, and we are in the aspect of receiving. And so there's a reason why we were created in that aspect, opposite of God, and actually opposite of opposite of God. And we have to go through a lot of learning. We've gone through this already, but we will revisit it again and again. But here, what we're saying is that, when you want to love somebody, you love somebody the hard truth is that you love somebody because they are similar to you. So if somebody has the opposite politics of you, you don't really love them. You maybe make space for them, and maybe you make allowances, but it's not really love. And so love is when you have similarity of form. When you are similar to someone, you feel a very close bond and you feel love. So here, what the Bal Ha Sulam is coming to tell you is a very important point, is that in our essence, in our root, we are all exactly the same, and therefore every human person, and not only humanity, but also all of the universe, all the plants and all of the rocks and everything else, is in its essence all coming from a unified source. And so there is already at our root unity, balance, and love, and all the things that we want already exist. In spirituality, things don't go away. There's just like a replica made. We've talked about this, that in each level of in the descent into the spiritual, into the physical world, we have all of these differences start to emerge, but in the essence, we are exactly the same. And so we can look forward to loving each other in a full, when this is revealed, everybody will have love for some people, for everybody else, and all of humanity and the planet and the environment, because they are looking at themselves. And so when we look at ourselves, it says in the Talmud, love covers over everything. And so when we love something, we don't see the differences. So although we will, when the Messiah comes, when Mashiach comes, when we enter into Mashiach consciousness, we will still have differences, but we will have like Jordan Peterson likes to say, we're going to have two systems at the same time. One of them is a hierarchy, and the other one is the balance, and that everybody feels is the same exact, and we all are equal, and so equality. And so these two things happen simultaneously, one on top of the other, like a horse on a rider, or like Abraham, he bought Maras HaMachpelah, a double-level cave. And so the spiritual life that we experience is sitting on top of our physical life, and they both come into balance with each other, and that's what the revealed Torah is for. But I want to stay away from conversations about the revealed Torah in this class, because there are so many confusions about what the Jewish people are doing that it becomes very hard to tease apart why we see all of the problems in religion today. And so just to say in short that it's much easier if we think about Kaballah, about the Zohar as a science, because that's what it is, and not worry about the revealed Torah and all the other religions and all the problems that seem to emerge out of that. For the religious students here who are observant Torah Jews, we will continue to have a conversation about how we can start to integrate both of these systems and see how they are complementary, not oppositional. And as everybody knows, I said numerous times that I'm a Chabad Chassid and a student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe goes into detail about how to understand the importance of halacha once we have entered into spirituality. Okay, moving forward. The essence of every person is exact. Oh, just did that one. Sorry. We had a long holiday here. We just had Yom Kippur, which is a fast day, and then after the fast day comes a lot of indulging, and so I had way too much food, and even, I'll admit, some alcohol, and so I'm doing my best. Okay, here we go. Each person's spiritual work is different and is able to reveal a unique revelation of God. Each person's spiritual work is different and is able to reveal a unique revelation of God. Okay, so there's a famous story that goes with this statement, which is a fundamental point for studying Kabbalah and entering into spirituality, which is a very organized, methodical chart of how you go from stage to stage and get through each spiritual gate. And in short, it is just the more altruistic you become, the more that you acquire a sixth sense of perception. And in that altruistic space, we become not only aware of God, but we start to have communications with this neural net of consciousness. And so here we are saying each person's spiritual work is different and is able to reveal a unique revelation of God. Okay, so this sounds very nice and sweet when you're living in Brooklyn and you have your law practice and you have a nice house in Westchester. But let's say we put you on a boat. Okay, this is the example that we have in Kabbalah. If they put you on a boat, and one person had all the food, and one person had all the navigational skills, and one person had the bucket, and you would all of a sudden find yourself in a situation where you were being very, very careful about how you speak to people and what kind of message you give somebody. So if I come in to a room and I think that I have all the money, then I might say to somebody flippantly, I might make a comment about them, and they might dislike me for years or even a whole entire lifetime because I made them feel insignificant, or I insulted them in public, God forbid. And so here what we're saying is that in spirituality, every single person has their own unique piece of this puzzle. And so when we want shleimus, wholeness, the spiritual kli, the spiritual vessel, the dish, the receiver in which we receive and which we can communicate with the spiritual worlds, is a unified mirror of God. And God is a simple unity, and what God has given us a gift that we come together collectively and we make our unity. And so it says in Kagavna, one of the prayers that we say on Friday night, oneness mirroring oneness. And that when we come into Friday, which is a metaphor for the Messianic times, for higher consciousness, when we enter into that place, the way that we are able to receive, and we're receiving in order to make God happy. And so we're receiving, the way that we receive is because we have built a mirror, and the mirror is all of humanity unified together. And so the only way to do this is if we truly love each other and we truly respect each other, and we're on something called smallness to each other, which means katnus, which means I have to find something that this person has that I don't have in order to really respect them, not to just show them respect, but to know that this person has water and I don't have water, or this person can lift so much weight, and that if we go somewhere that I need this person to be his strength, then I'm going to be very careful that I am treating him properly. And so this is what this very simple statement means, that every single person has something that we need. And when we figure out what that is, and this goes doubly for all the nations of the world. And so we're going to look around the world and we're going to realize that one nation has something that no other nation has, and that in order to unify with them, we are going to have to find out what they need from us and what we need from them, and everything's going to become put together like a big puzzle, and we're going to have beautiful balance and unity within the world. Okay, moving forward. The main aspect of our exile is our not being aware of God's love for us. The more we become aware of God's love, the more we come out of the darkness. The main aspect of our exile is our not being aware of God's love for us. The more we become aware of God's love, the more we come out of darkness. Okay, so we've covered this before, and I will go over it, and if I'm speaking too quickly, you can always slow down the video and look at it that way, but I promise you that we're going to revisit these concepts over and over again as we continue to learn. But there's a reason why we are unaware of God's existence. And so people say, I can't see God, so God doesn't exist. I'm a brilliant person, I'm a professor, I'm a poet, I'm somebody who's very, very aware, and I do not see God, and so therefore I don't like that you are telling me that God exists and that you're forcing God on me. And so this is not, in Kabbalah, we don't force people, everybody comes of their own. In spirituality, it's a truism that there is no forcing, and so people have to come at the right time and of their own volition. But God wanted to create a world where we have two things: free will and an ability to earn and participate in creation. And so because of that, God withdrew himself in something called simsum, which is a restriction. But God is not unaware of us. It's the Alter Rebbe, the first rabbi of Lubavitch, said there was a big argument amongst the Kabbalists in Europe, and some of them believed that, like I believe Albert Einstein believed that God withdrew himself and he's really no longer present. So this is completely not true, and the Alter Rebbe explains that although we are hidden, it's like if a teacher leaves the classroom but's looking through the window, we don't feel God, but God can see everything. God not only can see everything, but he is everything. And so all the feelings and all the emotions and all the problems that we have are completely, intimately present for God, and he cares about them more than we do, and so he's not missing any of the picture. It's just that he created a space where we don't feel him, and in order so that we can grow and develop and come back to our spirituality in a way that is completely enjoyable for us, which means that we have not only free will and an identity, but we feel that we have worked and we've earned all of these stages of consciousness, and that when we come back into this unified place, we feel very much that we are proud to be there and standing on our own 2 feet. Okay. Any questions?
Just a comment.
Yes.
Going back to an earlier statement, the consciousness of giving is called freedom, which is just such an amazing thing to say, especially after you brought up the 4 secular contributors today. And I'm familiar with Jordan Peterson and with Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein had this amazing 3-hour talk with Dr. Malone and others in the beginning of COVID. It was fascinating. But it just makes me reflect that if freedom is giving, and freedom comes from Hashem, and Hashem's constantly giving and recreating the world every moment, and it just seems like many of the secular thinkers are also, sometimes they're talking about too that if we all just operate in our own best interest, that somehow it'll all work out in the end. And this has been the whole capitalistic thrust, in the sense that every country and everyone just does what's best for them, then somehow it's all going to work out good. And I just wonder if the whole tyrannical, if I'm able to say this, the whole tyrannical impulse that's in the world at the moment, whether it's calling us to give more, because if we don't, we're going to be forced to, basically, by all the leaders. So, that's it. I just wanted to
Yes, it's a beautiful point. I hope that the audience, that the virtual audience can hear what you said. I hope they can hear what you said. I'll try to say in very short what you're saying is that it seems today that the system is built on, most of the social systems are built on self-interest. And so, and that this is why we have all of the problems today. So, as is always the case in Kabbalah, or 90% of the time, 95% of the time, in Kabbalah, things are simple and they are complicated at the same time. And so we have to be able to wrap our head around the paradox. So, in Torah Judaism, we have something called the collective and the individual. So prat and klal, I believe, is in Hebrew. So we have a dual system, and so these are worlds of consciousness, and that's why it's so important, and it's much easier, I think, for a person who is a Torah observant Jew to understand this, but I'll do my best to explain it, is that we have to have 2 things happening at once. We have our individual, physical, material self, and we have our spiritual self. And so this is a problem that happens in a lot of postmodern thinking, is that once we realize that we want something to be better, we want women to have more rights, which of course we do, and then we start to say that, so men and women are exactly the same. And so we have to do 2 things at once. On the one hand, we want equality where equality makes sense, and then we want the differences to remain. So therefore, in Torah Judaism, I said the Maras HaMachpelah. That's why Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were trying to build this methodology. And so the first thing they had to do is realize that it's a dual game. On the one hand, we have our personal space, our necessity, it's called in Kabbalah, and then we have the collective. And so those 2 things have to come into balance. And so the United States of America was a massive step forward in human consciousness, because they said people have a right to operate in their own self-interest. And so that is halachic Judaism. We are not talking about getting smacked around and being hurt by other people. No, we are talking about retaining our individuality, retaining our personal space, retaining our ability to work to our full potential and be rewarded for that work, and at the same time be able to find balance between all peoples. So some people are going to be better at reading, and some people are going to be better at building, and some people are better at cooking, and some people are better, and so this is a very complicated picture. So what we need to do is we need to bifurcate our thinking. And so when we're thinking about the individual, and we're thinking about our own family and our private space. This is called, I'm trying to remember in Gemara what all of the halachot about your personal domain and your public domain. There's all these things about if you lose something in your in the public space, there's one law, and if you lose something in private or in your backyard, there's another law about what is your obligations are to return things. So these are exactly what we're talking about. That this is where we get into a terrible corruption where somebody thinks, we say in Torah Judaism, I'm a good person, but I'm not a shmata, I'm not a rag. And so this is very important. You see a lot of times, especially with women who are very giving and very, have a high functioning emotional quotient, that sometimes there is a problem where a person thinks, if I just give a little bit more, then this person is going to respond to me in the right way and have respect for me and have and give me what I want. And so unfortunately, without a spiritual awakening on the other person's part, that is not going to happen. And so we have to understand that in our personal space, we have to have our necessities met. And then in the spiritual space, we have to be concerned with giving to others. And so the example that they give in Kaballah is the body. There's a spiritual body. The same way there's a physical body, the physical body is actually the material manifestation of the spiritual body. These things are all copies that exist in each level of consciousness. They manifest in different ways. And so we look at a spiritual body, physical body, we can actually use that as a map for the spiritual body. And so you have a stomach, and your stomach has needs, and you have to meet your stomach's needs. And you have lungs, and the lungs have needs, and you have to meet the needs of the lungs. And so it would be preposterous for the stomach to take some of the oxygen that's needed for the lungs and vice versa. So how do we find balance in this thing? Is that the bottom line is when I wake up in the morning, my soul and my brain tells me, let's go to a baseball game. And my arm doesn't say, oh, I like baseball, and my kidneys say I don't. Actually, your kidneys might say, you know what, I don't mind going, but you don't drink so much because you're actually you're hurting me. And so you do have communication, but ultimately there's a unified identity in a healthy person, and that person is an arbitrator between all of these different organs. And that's why we look in Torah Judaism for sages, for people who have entered into spirituality themselves, people who have entered into altruism, and people that we can trust. So there's no shortage of people who have been hurt by being connected to an inappropriate or a lacking spiritual advisor. And so this is something it's very dangerous, you see. But in Orthodox Judaism, people are very reticent to get involved in any spiritual practices that they don't understand, or even connect themselves to a rabbi who is not, in their estimation, somebody who is holding in an altruistic space. So if you meet somebody who is, and the Torah, this is a completely different conversation, but the Torah, if it says, I'm not sure where, somebody who knows will tell me, but there's a quote from the Bal Ha Sulam that the Torah is a portion of life, the Torah is a portion of death. And so it is possible to learn Torah, and the Rambam makes the same point, that it is possible to learn Torah and to really end up in a very bad place, to become very egoistic. And so if a person takes something that belongs in the oven and they put it in the refrigerator, they should not be surprised that by the results. And so if somebody takes the wisdom of the Torah and instead of putting it into their higher soul in order to become a better person, in order to exit Mitzrayim, in order to transcend their ego, and they put it into their ego and they say, if I learn Kabbalah, maybe people will like me more. If I am a big rabbi, maybe I'll have more money, more power over the community, and more respect. And so these are dangers. It says in the Gemara that the higher you go in these spiritual levels, the more you are tested and the greater your desire is, because God is the greatest desire. So when we have very simple desires, when all we want is a small house in somewhere in upstate New York, that person, and a nice dinner at the diner, this person who maybe works as a construction worker, it's very possible, and this is something that confuses people in the Torah community very often, it is very possible, maybe even likely, that when you meet this person who is a truck driver, who has a small farm behind his house, that this person is much nicer and much more polite and much more likely to make space for you than if you meet the biggest doctor at Mount Sinai, or you meet a very, very confused Talmud scholar who is learning in the wrong way, which is called lo lishma, which means not for the sake of transcending your ego and finding union with God, but you're doing it lo lishma. And so hopefully in communities where they have good rabbis, they try to get people to graduate in the right time from lo lishma to lishma, from the wrong reasons to the right reasons. But if you meet somebody who is a religious Jew and they are behaving improperly, it is very important to do a few things. One is to not to make an assumption that this is every single person that you're meeting. It says in the Talmud, 1,000 go in and 1 comes out. And so we should not be surprised. If you go into the army, you should not be surprised that there are people who are stealing and that there's waste. There's a joke that they said they never cancel a war because they were stealing. They never said, you know what, there's too much stealing, there's too much corruption, there's too much, we have to cancel the war. It doesn't happen. So when you have people in the religious community and you meet somebody who is not acting particularly nice to you, first thing you should do is get some distance from that person. The second thing you should do is realize that your job is to not engage that person so that you can find the next person beyond that person who is actually an amazing person. So I have a quick story. I used to live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I started to go into the Haredi community, the Satmar community, and I only met holy people with shining faces. There's people who don't know who the Beatles are, and people who don't know, have never been outside of the community, and you walk in and their face is literally shining, and they are filled with just immense love. And so other people would go to the same community as me and they say, oh, I met some people who didn't have manners, and I met somebody who didn't seem to be behaving very well in business. And so this is what's called in Kabbalah katnus, smallness. So if you want to find somebody, this is a truism that the holy people, you are not hiding from the holy people. The holy people are hiding from you because they don't want, it says in the Talmud that the sages can burn you if you get too close to somebody. And so they are doing a huge chesed by staying out of your way and not offering any kind of information to you that would be understood in a bad way, or God forbid that you might have a bad thought about them, or a bad thought about, or say something to somebody else about them, and that might cause a spiritual damage for you. So they are very careful to stay insulated. And so if you want to meet these people, you have to know that they're there and understand that you have to get through all of the people. There's another thing that I like to say, I'm going in a lot of different directions, I hope people are following me, that in the Batman movies, usually what happens is, there's a real Batman, and then you have all of these people who pretend to be Batman, and those people who pretend to be Batman are pretty tough. They're all dressed up, and they go to the gym, and they have ropes that fall down, and they look pretty impressive, and so you can make a mistake and think that you're talking to Batman. In the movie, somebody thinks that this is Batman until Batman shows up. And so if you are looking for a spiritual teacher, and your spiritual teacher does anything that makes you think, wow, this person's arrogant, or this person wants my money, or that's an invitation for you to look for a different teacher and not say all spiritual teachers are now bad. And so this is a mistake that happens very often. And so let's not be immature that way. Let's understand that if you are in katnus to your higher self, then you will find your higher self. But if you know more than your higher self, then you are going to be, that's a gate in spirituality. That is a locked door. And we have to learn how to open doors. Okay? This is a huge conversation. We'll return it again. How much time do we have, Shlomo? It's time now? Okay. That's it. Class is over. We'll pick all this up next week. Thank you so much for joining us. And Eric and Brett Weinstein, and sorry for saying your names together, Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein and Lex Friedman. I hope that you get this message, and I hope that it's received with love and respect, that I said it and in the way that I said it, and that if you reach out to us here in Sfat, Israel, in northern Israel, the home of Kabbalah, we would love to pick up the conversation with you.
Go ahead.